So we lost 10% and made 25%, spending $1,200. The kids made like $150. Like 2 toddlers made $150.
That is today's guest, Chris Hutchins. He's host of the popular podcast, All the Hacks, where he shares strategies and tactics to help you upgrade your life, money, and travel, all while spending less and saving more. Since he's done over 225 episodes on his podcast featuring a variety of experts and is personally an avid, quote, life hacker who strives to maximize happiness at the lowest cost, I asked him to curate his 5 best hacks of all the hacks, things that he has learned from his podcast and from his personal experience. And because of that, this episode's packed with actionable takeaways around life, money, and travel, including a money philosophy that can free you from the goal of endless accumulation, where you can find unclaimed money that you may be owed, why a second trip to a destination is often better than the first, how to negotiate anything using one simple phrase so you can find, for example, the best deal on accommodations, and loads more happening in this show right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. As you heard at the top, Chris Hutchins is here, the host of the All the Hacks podcast. If you resonate with what he shares today, be sure to check it out. I want to remind you also, we have a newsletter, ZeroToTravel.com/newsletter. Keep in touch off the pod and join the community there. You can find out all the good stuff happening off the pod, and it's free to sign up. Stick around on the back end of this interview. I'll share a little rant, I suppose you could call it, on life hacking. I mean, are we supposed to be optimizing everything in our lives at all times? Is life about that? I do think there is a balance, but overall, of course, we want to do things smarter. We want to know about ways we can save and earn money, have great travel experiences. You're going to hear some of those ways today, but if you're curious, stick around on the back end after the interview. I'll share a few of the downsides of, quote, life hacking. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Chris. Please enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Chris Hutchins, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. It's good to see you. Long time coming.
I'm excited to be here.
Hey, we got something in common, man. I was on your website, and what did I do with it? Well, I know people that are listening can't see, but I'm going to hold this up for you right here. Monopoly Deal. What a great game.
What a great game.
Just for those of you listening, if you're looking for, you always have to have a good game when you're traveling. Monopoly Deal. Unreal, right? I know you're a fan.
That's good. I'm a big fan. I do have a small portable card game on my desk, which is a game called Coyote.
Okay.
Which I'm going to guess you haven't heard of because it's like a month old. But a friend of mine, Tim Ferriss, made this game.
Oh, really?
He had a vision of, I want to make a game, and I want it to be something fun that friends could play when they're hanging out together. And he embarked on a journey with the creator of Exploding Kittens, and they spent like dozens of meetings, hundreds of meetings, I don't remember how many, going back and forth trying to design the perfect like friend party game, kids or adults.
Nice. All right. Is it cool? I mean,
it's funny.
The
box says ages 10 and up, and I have 2 kids under 5. So I tried to play what I thought was a pretty easily modified version of the game with them, and they love it.
Really? Okay.
The mechanics that I think would make it fun for an adult get lost playing with toddlers. But the general premise for anyone who's like, is this a thing I should do? Is you're laying out all these cards. Do you remember that game where you all have like a drink and you have to do a thing where it's like, you've got to take your little man off your drink, or you got to like hold your pinky finger. And if you don't, you end up having a drink. It's kind of like that with no drinking, where there's all these cards and you all go around in a circle and you all have to like do the action, but you might have to say it in a whisper, or you might have to do it with your left hand. And Something like that. It's hard to explain. Google Coyote on YouTube, and I'm sure you will find someone playing it. But it's my new travel game since I just got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we haven't talked too much about travel games here. So there we go. There's 2 for you, and they have to be pretty mobile, pretty easy to carry around. So
we got a roll-up
games
backgammon set, too, that's like the size of, this is a weird reference, but the size of like a recorder, like the musical instrument. It's like a little tiny tube backgammon set that my wife and I like.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my wife and I traveled with this, and she still, well, I won't let her live it down. The slaughter that she took on our cruise around Ha Long Bay in Vietnam. I must have won about 20 games in a row, but luckily she doesn't listen to this podcast because she hears me talking enough. Hey, speaking of podcasts, I mean, you've done how many now over at All the Hacks? How
Over
long have
200.
you been doing this?
I was just counted this up the other day, 225 maybe at this point, plus another 10 that have probably been recorded and haven't been released.
Do you have a ritual before you do a show?
I am very much not a ritual kind of person. Like everyone is, the type of prep, the type of getting ready. I think my only ritual that is consistent is hopefully I remember to hit record on all the devices, which has become a ritual only because one time I did not. And then the second one is I look in the mirror to make sure I don't need to shave. Okay. Other than those two things.
Clearly I don't do that. That is not part of my ritual.
If someone saw me unshaven, I don't have the luxury of good-looking facial hair. So,
well, you've done some incredible episodes, and that's why I've asked you today to bring this list, the 5 best hacks of all the hacks, which is the title of your podcast, All the Hacks. We're going to get into that, but you're a big traveler. I know that, and you've done a lot with. You've been able to do a lot, like I said, with travel points and things like that. It might play into the list. We'll see. I just had a general travel question. I wanted to ask you how travel what role has travel played in your life?
Yeah, I would say all kinds of roles. From like travel was my wife and I's vetting of should we get married, right? Like we went on a 7-month trip and we're like, if we can live together for 7 months, like we could probably do this for, 70 years.
It's a great litmus test, man.
Yeah, you could say travel is a marriage litmus test. It's a way to expand your horizons. It's a way to get really uncomfortable. Funny enough, you mentioned Ha Long Bay. I remember we did a similar boat cruise through Ha Long Bay, and not one other couple on the boat spoke English. And so I ended up playing translator with a couple that spoke French so that my wife could participate in the conversation. And I'm like school and college French, but not professional. I was never fluent. And so like travel's a great way to learn how to speak other languages, or even learn how to speak English with people who don't speak it comfortably. We've had a ton of au pairs in our family for the last 4 years, and a ton, 4. But anytime I notice, some family that hasn't done a lot of travel is around them, they just talk at such a speed and use a style of talking that for someone who English isn't their first language, isn't always easy to converse with. And I think travel has taught me, like a version of English that everyone can communicate with, which is very different from the English we're probably using right now.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're sensitive to those things, this is a funny story that happened just this last week to me. I mean, I live in Norway. I'm a citizen here now. I speak Norwegian, all that. And even then, there are still constant faux pas, like language fails. And I asked my mother-in-law what she thought happened when you die, which I know is a heavy question, but we were in this conversation. And I realized later, I told my wife about the conversation, and she's like, oh, that sounds like a weird question the way you phrased it. She probably thought you were asking what happens when she actually dies. Like, what does she think is going to happen when she dies? Not what, like when a person dies, what's going to happen, but when she specifically dies, what's going to happen? And that's not a good question to ask your mother-in-law. So I'm going to have to go back and kind of clean that one up. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the language thing certainly gets you out of your comfort zone. I hope you didn't have any faux pas there on the
I can't think of too many faux pas. The other really big one is, you probably know this. It seems like most people that live all over the world that have less than many of us do, that are living in, countries we live in, like the US or Norway, they're really happy. And I know so many people that have more and are not happy. And I think just seeing that has made me appreciate life so much more. And it's true almost in any second, third world country you go to. I think people don't feel like they're on this crazy rat race that could lead to the American dream that kind of is pervasive in our society. And that attitude's really good for entrepreneurship, for business, for wealth creation, for the economy. But sometimes it causes us to lose sight of the fact that like, we have it good, like life is good. And travel really reminds me of that and kind of humbles the circumstance that many of us are in.
Did you grow up in Virginia area?
Yeah, I grew up outside DC in like a, upper middle class suburban town, with access to a major metro city pretty close by.
Yeah. And now you live?
Now we live in the Bay Area. Right outside San Francisco.
Bay Area. Okay. So you mentioned travel, giving you that perspective on life. And I know a big part of what you do with your work and at All the Hacks is optimization is a word that comes up. Is part of your description for your podcast. Learn the strategies and tactics to upgrade your life, money, and travel, all while spending less and saving more. Chris is an optimizer who has saved millions by breaking down every aspect of life to maximize happiness at the lowest cost. I'm just wondering for you, you mentioned like a good life and this perspective and sort of the chase for the American dream that can, who knows what that means anymore. Is optimizing your life a good goal?
I think a version of it is a good goal. And in some ways, a version of it is a terrible goal, right? There's a lot of behavioral science research that shows that people who satisfice instead of maximize are much happier. So the data also shows they don't get the best outcome, but the best outcome doesn't always matter. So a great example, and I think the fact that I have a podcast makes this a little bit worse in my life because I use the fact that optimization can be content. But last night I was looking at flights and we're going on a trip and the flight was $210 for this one-way flight we wanted. And I was ready to book it. And then most of the time when we search for flights as families, we don't always think to go put all the number of passengers in. So I put the 4 passengers in, and now all of a sudden the flight's like $240. And I'm like, whoa, why is it so expensive? And then I was like, well, what if it's 3 people? At 3 people, it was back to $210. And so I was like, I looked and turns out there were just 3 seats in that fare class. So I was like, oh, should I buy 3 seats in the fare class and then buy a 4th seat in another fare class and then reach out to United and have them like link the itineraries because I want to make sure that I can pick the preferred seat for my wife so we all sit together. And then now we're managing 2 separate records. And I ran the math of what the actual price difference was. And it was about $30, right? And so here I am thinking, can I get this done? And I couldn't figure it out online. So I messaged United support. I'm like, 30 minutes into this, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, and the irony of it all was that by the time I actually figured it out, and I'm not convinced this happened, but those 3 seats were not available, and I just had to buy the 4 seats at the $30 more price at the end of the day. There was no way to actually even do the thing, which was just a great reminder that I should have done the thing from the start. So I would say learning to optimize, and then, one of the things, one of the guests I've had on a couple times, a guy named Ramit Sethi, he wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And it sounds a little scammy in its title, but he's anything but that. And one of the things he often says is like, you've got to learn how to play the game at the level you are. And so I'm not at the level where I should optimize a family vacation for $30. Now, I can't always help myself, and I do get a tremendous amount of joy out of that process. But at the expense of an hour of sleep last night, I'm not sure it was worth the trade-off. And so I'm still learning. But I catch myself frequently in those scenarios and say, yep, let's just not do it. And if I didn't have a podcast where I thought, oh, this would be a good story to tell of me going through this, I would have definitely been able to catch myself. But in some way, I'm like, well, if, anything that is part of the story of what I can tell on a weekly basis on the show, like that's actually part of my job. And in a way, I convince myself to do these things that, probably aren't worth it, but they're kind of fun.
That's a good example. Yeah, the correct solution, by the way, Chris, was to buy the 3 tickets in that class and then buy your wife the first class ticket.
Oh, yeah.
That
I have actually tried that on multiple occasions, and I don't think my wife appreciates it like I thought it would go over well. She's like, I would rather just sit with you guys. Like,
Yeah.
Now, I think if I forced her to, she'd be like, well, that was pretty nice.
That wasn't too bad. No, I'm kidding. All right. So that's like, you can tie that to a monetary outcome, right? But are there other examples that you have in your personal life where you're like, you know what? Like maybe I shouldn't pay somebody to clean the house because there is value in, getting down on my knees and scrubbing toilets and, or whatever. Like I'm using that as a random example, but can you think of any other things like that you're like, hey, is this, sometimes I feel like you said, there's good and bad. And sometimes you can optimize so far that you take the humanity out of just being a person.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a challenge when we talked about doing the 5 hacks from all the hacks, one of them is going to be, learning to value your time and learning to buy, how you can actually buy more of it. And so I think you have to look and say, it's a tricky equation, right? Someone could go calculate their time and it would have really positive impacts and it can also have really negative impacts. So I'll give one example, which is, I think in this day and age with all the gig economy work, at any point in time, someone could probably go be a DoorDash delivery person, Uber Eats, Uber driver, Instacart, whatever your particular gig economy job in whatever country you're in. You can always turn that on. And depending on where you live, that might be $10 or it might be $40 an hour. And so in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, I have this minimum rate. Now, the positive thing there is if there's something that I could outsource, if I treat that rate as my hourly rate and I'm thinking, gosh, it's going to take me, 4 hours to clean the house, but someone else would clean the house for, I don't know, less than that cost, maybe. And I don't like doing it. That's probably a good use of my time. The flip side is if you sit down to watch a show on TV with your wife and you're like, well, is this show worth the fact that we could both be earning $30? Like, you don't want to go down that path because then you're like, I'm buying my entertainment. Like I'm paying $60 to watch a TV show with my wife. And then I'm like, well, I got to pay taxes. So it's not a full 60. You go down so I found that I've been able to just not think about it from my free time cost me money standpoint. But it's been really helpful for me to think about, should I be doing this task or should I be outsourcing this task using a tool like Upwork or using, bringing on a full-time person to join your small business, or just not doing something, or hiring people in scenarios where you don't get value out of it. I get a ton of value, not necessarily on cleaning, but on fixing things. And so like hanging a TV in our house on the wall.
Right. Great example.
I had a friend and he messaged me. He was like, who did you call? And I was like, I did it. And he's like, it seems like a waste of your time. And I was like, yeah, but like there's something that feels good about solving a physical problem. And so it's worth my time because the satisfaction I get out of it. Every time I see that TV, I'm like, I hung that TV on a tile wall. Like I figured that out and I had to go, run a wire through the ceiling and drop it down. Like I enjoy that. So if you enjoy it, that doesn't mean you should buy the time. But if every day you feel like you're, one of the things I've learned when it comes to buying time that's interesting is there are things that are obvious. Like most people probably know you could hire someone to clean your house. Like that's a thing that most people in the world know is possible. One thing that I just tried because I wasn't sure if it was possible. People probably also know you could hire a chef to come to your house and cook dinner. And they probably in the back of their mind think it's really, really expensive because it usually is. One time I just put an ad out on Craigslist that was like, I'm looking for someone to take some recipes each week, buy the groceries and make them. Right? Like I don't need a professional chef. Like it's always funny whenever you cook something really great using a recipe and people are like, oh my gosh, you're such a great chef. And I'm like, I literally just followed directions. Like I bought the ingredients and I followed the steps. And it doesn't take someone with a, extreme education to do that thing. And someone that lived in the neighborhood and was retired but looking for some extra work was like, oh, I'd love to do this. And the cost was pretty reasonable, like a tiny fraction of what you would have paid for like a fancy chef to come to your house and cook in your kitchen. So they would just cook a couple meals, put them in glass Tupperware, drop them off for 2 days, and we kind of would reheat them that night and the next night. And they made enough that we had leftovers for lunch. And the cost was very reasonable. And so I was like, wow. every day it felt like my wife and I were racing to finish work so that we could go get dinner done. Because as you know, and maybe things are different in Norway, but like once you have kids, you eat a lot earlier. So you're like racing to make dinner at the end of the work
senior
day.
Senior citizen hours over here.
Yeah, I know. And so that bought us back that like 30, 45 minutes when we're trying to wrap work up. And we can either, if we wrap work up, we can just go hang out with the kids instead of be making dinner in the kitchen. Now we like to cook, so we don't do that 7 days a week, but we don't, right now we've kind of put it on a pause. But it's something that for a solid year bought us, 30, 45 minutes a day, 3-4 days a week. And we got to spend a ton of time with our really young kids or finish up work that we would have stressed us out hanging out with the family later. So,
yeah. Yeah. Everybody's got to make their own call when it comes to that and find the balance. And it sounds like you're able to compartmentalize that to an extent. Like you said, sitting down and watching something with your wife, you're not calculating the hours lost, and income or whatever.
But if there's something you don't enjoy doing, there might be a way to outsource that activity. And then the other one that I think people miscalculate in their minds is the value of free time if you are in a profession where creativity and, out of the box thinking can pay off. And so I find that some of my best ideas for podcast episodes, they don't come from me sitting down and like running through a task list. They come from me having some free time on the calendar. And so sometimes it's hard to realize that and say, gosh, I got to outsource these tasks so I have free time. There's not actually a thing to do, but that free time unlocks different aspects of the business. And so, for example, since we're on a travel show, we ended up taking a group trip to Iceland because I wanted to go to Iceland. And we thought, if we're going to organize like the best trip possible to Iceland, why not bring other people with us? Like economies of scale, like if people in our audience like to optimize travel, wouldn't that be fun? I don't think the execution of that and the ideation of it would have really come from anything other than just being kind of a little bit more free in my time to think about other things we could do in our business.
I agree. Yeah, the walk is a great example. Like stopping and going for a walk, and you're like, "Well, I'm not getting things done." It's like it's not measurable because the walk for me leads to a waterfall of ideas, and I didn't have my walk today actually, so I'm a little grumpy. No, but I need that. You're right. I mean, you need that time, and there's value in that for sure. You mentioned the term optimizing travel when you're talking about your Iceland trip. Do you have thoughts around how you optimize travel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, we said we were going to talk about these 5 hacks, and one of them, I'm like slowly leading them in. So maybe the summary at the end is like, let's recap them because we somehow got into all of them naturally.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
I think one of them, which for people who love traveling and love to go see new places, I think the most underrated hack that I'll even level up to one of my top 5, at least if I want one to be about travel, is the second trip somewhere. Like the second trip somewhere is often the best trip somewhere because you have no pressure to go see the things that you felt like you had to see the first time. You can really go and just kind of, to steal the word that Rolf Potts used on my show, flaneuring around the city. You're just kind of like wandering and getting more immersed in what people are doing than trying to go see the 3 things you want to see. Sure, you could just do that the first trip, but there's something about having the comfort of, I've already kind of figured out how the subway works here. I kind of understand the high level of the general culture. I've kind of ticked off a few of the places. I know where they are. I know what I like. And now I can just kind of go and you really feel so much more immersed in those cities. And funny enough, I started my travel journey with like, I want to see all these places. Like in many ways, some of the trips we've taken have come from the fact that there's so many places in the world. I want to go see so many of them. Let's keep traveling because how are we ever going to see, 190 something countries if we don't constantly go? But when my wife and I sit down and we're like, where should we go next year? We're like, I'd love to go back to Japan. Like we've been there 4 times, but I'd love to go back. Like really love it. Paris, love it. Bora Bora, being on the west coast of the US is like great. And a part of me is like, well, we've never been to the Maldives. Like but like Bora Bora is great. We understand it. We know it. It's closer. And I think sometimes in the travel world, we can get our heads wrapped around wanting to, check off all the bucket lists of new places. and lose sight of the fact that the experience you have traveling doesn't have to be a new place. It could be a new thing, and that new thing could come from going to the same place again.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get a chance to dive deeper, essentially. It's a part of the slow travel movement, I guess.
Yes. If you went to a place for the first time but went for 3 weeks, you'd have a very similar experience. And so maybe the answer is stay longer than it takes to do the highlights, because then you'll have time to appreciate it. For people with schedules that don't permit longer, slower travel, maybe that means, a second trip. But I think sometimes we get caught up in, I have to go to all these places and see all these things. And, it's one of the reasons we've never done New Zealand and Australia as a family. And I regret the fact that I haven't been able to fight this kind of challenge in my brain, which is, well, why would we ever go there if we only have a week off? With kids' school schedules, sometimes spring break, we could go, and summer's their winter, so it's not ideal. So how could we go for more than a week? And a friend of mine, if anyone's familiar with the Frequent Miler on the Air podcast, it's kind of more focused on points and miles. But Nick from the Frequent Miler was like, I had this same attitude. And then we just went for a week because we were like, look, if we need 2 weeks, we'll go back. And he's like, it was amazing. And doing that unlocked so much for our family travel over the next, decade, because we no longer had this idea of, well, let's not go to Europe because we don't have time to go see all the things we want to do. Let's not go here because it's not enough time. It's like, let's just go and do what we can, and then we can go back if we want more. I will say the biggest travel hack I personally think is the points and miles world, but it doesn't necessarily have to be played with credit card points. It could just be played with taking advantage of the fact that lots of airlines and hotel groups just sell their points online. And sometimes you could literally go and buy points from an airline and book that flight that in your mind is often thought of as, well, I could only book with miles if I played this points game, and I don't live in the US, so there's not all these crazy credit card offers. But there was a time where we saw this both hotel and flight example where it's like, wow, this hotel was so expensive, like 3,000 points a night or $3,000 a night. But it looked like such an incredible hotel in Spain on the island of Mallorca. But you could book it for 100,000 Hilton points, and you could buy those Hilton points for half a cent each. So you could just buy them on the website for $500 and then book the room. So you can get that, effectively, it was almost like 75, 80% off, or maybe it was more, 83% off on this hotel, but you didn't have to be playing the credit card game. You didn't have to be racking up Hilton points your whole life. You just go to the Hilton website and buy them. And so I think points and miles are an excellent way to reduce the cost of airfare and hotels all around the world and make it easier. And yes, it's awesome if you live in a country where you can open a credit card and get 200,000 points. But it's also awesome when airlines like Avianca sell their points for such a discount that you can also just effectively buy flights at, 60, 70, 80% off.
Are there go-to places for you where you find deals like that aren't credit card related, or just news or resources?
I would say Doctor of Credit, Frequent Miler on the Air, my newsletter. I would say once a month I'll share in my newsletter, hey, here are all the places where points and miles are on sale. There are some groups like Hilton and IHG and Avianca that are very consistently putting their points on sale. I will, if I find it, I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes. But I ran through the analysis of this once where it was how often do these airlines and hotel groups put their points on sale? And for some of them, it's all the time. I want to say Hilton's points are on sale as often as they're not on sale, and so for some of them, it's very rare. And for some of them, it's super expensive. So I don't think you're going to find a great deal if you need United miles. They don't seem to go on sale as often. And when they do, they're not cheap. But there are other groups where when they go on sale, it's just a great deal. And so I would say look for those.
The ultimate compliment to a destination from a traveler is to return to it, I would say. You could include a destination on your favorites list, but if you're actually spending the money to go back, and since you mentioned being to Japan 4 times, I have to ask you about what it is that you love about Japan.
The coming together of a totally different culture that seems to have so much respect for people and, the world and cleanliness and, calm, free spirits and, outdoors and all of the things. That's great. Add to that some of the best food in the world. So it's like you're going to this place where you experience a culture that feels both foreign and everything you want in a place that feels like you're in the future, eating the best meals of your life. It's just hard to not want that more often. Like, it's just all the things I want in a travel destination are like good food, efficient transportation, nice people, clean environment, something that feels new, but then places that have been there for, and a very heavy emphasis on craftsmanship, like quality things. I think the older I've gotten in life, the more it's not about trying to go have 1,000 things as much as it is to have one or two really nice things. So like I'd now rather buy a really nice jacket than buy, 7 H&M jackets over the next, 2 years. And Japanese culture really puts an emphasis on that and honing your craft and all that. So I just love it. Like I think it's one of the best travel destinations, and anyone listening who hasn't gone, I would definitely recommend.
I really want to go with my family. So perhaps this is a slightly selfish question. Sorry, folks, but maybe you can loop some other tips in. Best advice for traveling in Japan with a family, and maybe if you have some other tips about, just planning it out and things like that.
So with a family, I would say stay tuned. So I did an episode, which someone must be sharing it somewhere, but I think if you exclude the launch of the podcast, the episode I did on planning the best Japan trip ever with a guy named Brandon Presser, who has been to Japan probably 30 times, wrote The Lonely Planet, multiple editions about Japan, has been there to do luxury reporting for Bloomberg. So the entire spectrum of level of service and quality. We basically recorded an entire hour-long podcast about everything you need to know about planning a great trip to Japan. So I won't reiterate that. However, we just a week ago booked the first trip where we'll take the kids next April. And so now I was talking to Brandon and he was like, why don't we do he's like, is it time to do a follow-up? Because it's been the second most popular episode I've ever done. And it started off slow. Like the country episodes I do, sometimes people are like, well, I don't really want to go to Japan right now, so why am I going to listen to that? But the long tail on that episode has exceeded all but one other episode. And it's just a testament to how much people want to go to Japan. So my tips are probably not family related because we haven't done that yet, but will be if Brandon and I do an updated version on that. Stay tuned because that'll be a big focus because that's what we're doing. But more broadly, the same tips that apply to most places, which are like, don't overschedule your time because you could walk down tons of streets and find tons of interesting stuff. And so I think it's hard when you're like, gosh, I could go to all the places. It's like, just add more days in every place than you think you need. Go any time of year. We've been in December, we've been in spring, we've been in summer. It doesn't really matter. Just like immerse yourself in it. It doesn't matter really where you stay. The transportation is so good. I would say the one tip is find like a local ryokan where you can kind of stay in a Japanese style hotel, tatami mats on the floor. That kind of thing is really a cool experience. Embrace the onsen culture of hot springs. If you are not yet comfortable being naked around people of the same sex, get comfortable because that's what the hot springs is all about. Though being in Scandinavia, I assume you've probably been to some saunas and gotten comfortable there. Yeah. And then just eat all the food. Like we rescheduled our day so we had 4 meals instead of 3 just because there's just so much good food.
You're just like, no, we need to get up earlier so we can squeeze another meal in.
Yeah, we literally had 4 meals. I don't think that'll work with kids, but we definitely were doing 4 meals a day.
How old are your kids?
2 and 4.
What has fatherhood taught you so far?
There's just an unlimited number of things. Patience. I think for anyone who doesn't have kids, I was never the person that like saw other people's kids and was like, gosh, I just love kids. Like some people just love kids. I was like, they're fine. And so I probably had this question of like, gosh, how am I going to feel about mine? For anyone out there that's like, I feel that way, I love my kids, like to a degree that I couldn't even comprehend before having kids. But if you're a curious person in this world and you like learning things, there is nothing more amazing than being able to take all those things and both teach them and watch your kids learn them. So when we travel, it's like, let me show you this awesome thing. Let me watch you get excited about this thing that I was never even excited about. I did an episode with a guy named Derek Sivers, who's, I don't know, I'll call him like a modern philosopher, but it was a really fascinating episode. And in it, he talked about going to Paris with his son. And like his son found a cardboard box and just kind of like wanted to walk around with the cardboard box for like an hour and a half through the streets of Paris. And he was like, great, we'll do that. And he's like, I felt like I saw a Paris I've never seen before because I was watching it through my kids' eyes, like exploring whatever street they wanted to. No care about seeing the Eiffel Tower, just kind of enjoying what people are doing and what's going on. And so I think you can apply that everywhere to everything, whether it's wanting to learn about the ocean, wanting to learn about a book, wanting to just learn about, why we have toenails, like it doesn't matter. It's just so fun to watch these curious creatures teach you, so much and then humble you with like, you just think, and they're so brutally honest. They're like, Dad, that shirt looks dumb on you today. And I'm like, I'm not used to people saying that, but kids don't care about it.
I love the honesty. Yeah. The perpetual beginner's mind too. It's always a nice reminder to maintain that sort of lens. Well, like you, it's an infinite number of things. I would say I can second everything you said about having children. And also you're really trying to become a better human for somebody else. And that opens up a whole can of worms. I'll just say that. Are you willing to dive into the things, or am I willing to dive into the things that need to be dived into that are coming up, and, having children reveal some things you didn't even know about yourself. And then also, good and bad, I would say. And then I use bad with air quotes, but things that are perhaps needing to be either addressed or understood a bit better, perhaps, about your own psyche, your own soul, your own upbringing. It goes deep, man. It goes layers and layers deep, as you know. That's why there's whole other podcasts around this, but this isn't one of them. If it was one of them, I would be speaking more eloquently about the topic. All right, how many hacks have we covered, actually? Because now I'm confused. I mean, there's been a lot going on here.
Okay, so
we're at least 2 or 3 in.
Yeah. So 2 of them were go somewhere twice and value and buy your own time.
Yeah. Okay.
So you
want to move into the third one?
Yeah, let's do it. So I mentioned that the episode with Brandon on Japan was the second most popular episode of all time. The first was an episode with Bill Perkins, who wrote a book called Die with Zero. And rarely in life does learning something so abruptly change something in your life that was such a core piece of you. Like I haven't had the experience I had of talking to him frequently, if ever else. And in that moment, so the premise of the book, which is like not a crazy premise, is stop trying to accumulate. So, like this Scrooge McDuck world where you're like, I just want more, more, more. How much has my net worth gone up? How much has my income gone up? I just like save. His premise is most people who do that end up with more money than they thought. And, they're conservative and they end up with more money. And I realize there are millions, if not billions of people around the world who are not in this situation. So like, I'm consciously aware of that. But there are a lot of people who end up with more money or think all these things that I want money for, I'm going to do once I stop working. And it's very hard to do them. And travel is a great example. Like I think about my parents and I'm like, oh, do you guys want to go on a trip here? And they're like, we don't want to walk around everywhere all day and see everything. And we actually took them to Japan on our last trip. And, for them, 8 hours of exploring a day is not on their list anymore. They're probably down to 2 or 3. And so they missed half the stuff we did. And they're okay with that. But if exploring Japan was on their bucket list in their 20s, waiting until their 60s or 70s to do that trip was a mistake. And so his idea is you look at these seasons of life and, you spend the money earlier to do the things that will have the most value when you do them. And then the memories of them pay dividends throughout your life because we go back and we remember those stories. We retell those stories with others. We share them with the people that we were, with. And then, at the end of the day, the goal is to get to zero. So it's actually to spend your money, and not just constantly accumulate. And I remember my wife and I, we always had our family meeting. It wasn't as formal as some others. And we're like, all right, here's our net worth goal. How are we tracking towards it? And after, my wife had not heard the interview because I had just come out of it. And she was like, how are we working? I was like, I don't know if I care about that goal anymore. Like, that goal implies that we just want to increase and increase and increase. What if this year the goal is to decrease our net worth because it's the right season of life to start using some of our savings to do things that we can only do when our kids are young? Like, in a moment, all these things changed in my life about how I think about money. And so you can read the book. I think Bill has a very colorful vocabulary. And so it's the only episode I've ever put don't listen to this with your kids on speaker and, put some headphones on disclaimer at the beginning of the episode because he uses some choice language. But there's something about the way he is so extreme and in his conversational style that really just kicks the ideas into your mind in a way that kind of reading and skimming through a book didn't do for me, reading his book. And that conversation, I think it was episode 91, just left me with a whole new perspective. So I would say that the hack, if you will, and you'll notice that when I say hacks, I'm not talking about things that are say this thing at the Starbucks counter and get 50% off. Like, to me, a hack is really like a big mindset shift that can change your life and have a huge outcome, like outsized outcome. And so it is taking this new perspective of life is not purely about accumulating wealth. And I think, especially in the States, that's just such a kind of thing that's beaten into us in society, and escaping from it is really freeing. And that doesn't mean you need to go all the way down the other side of the kind of really extreme, cut all costs at all expenses and stop worrying about making money. But there's a happy balance in there. But learning that the goal is not purely about accumulation changed so much that I would encourage anyone who hasn't already come to that realization to go listen to that conversation or read the book or explore what Bill talks about.
Yeah, it's a great read. I've read the book, and now I'll have to go and listen to the conversation. But it's definitely a game changer, like you said. I mean, I hope I'm in the position at some point to be like, how am I going to spend all this money?
And I don't think it. I think there's this perspective of, well, look, Bill's probably like if not a 100 millionaire, maybe a billionaire, but I don't think it necessarily applies completely to you need an unlimited pool of funds to change your attitude, right? Like, I don't have enough money to stop working and keep doing everything we're doing for the rest of our lives without doing any work and making any money. But there are years where maybe that's not the year you want to save. Like, I think we have this, I've got to save every single year. And yes, saving is important. When you don't work, you need money. Like, if you retire, you can't just, some countries have Social Security and different benefits, but, maybe you have to pay into them. Maybe the country you live in doesn't. But in general, there is probably some world where you could spend more money, or you could evaluate how you spend money and say, hey, I think about this on a marginal level. My wife and I don't budget per se. Like, we don't track every dollar and plan how we spend it, but we do track every dollar so we know where we're spending it. And on an annual basis, we go in and say, you could stack rank it and say, well, of course, groceries are absolutely a necessary thing. We're not going to cut those. And then you could start to look at all the things you spend money on. And you could say, hey, what's the thing we would cut if we had to cut 5%? And then look at that and say, what's the thing we would add if we spent 5% more? And ask yourself whether those things are inversed. And it's very possible that the thing you would cut if you had to reduce 5-10% of your spending is actually not as interesting as the thing that you would spend money on if you added 5 to 10%. And so that gives you a chance to spend money more intentionally. And I think that's really the theme. The theme is look at your life, look at where you spend money, and make sure you're not spending inconsistent with what you want to get out of life. And it doesn't have to mean you have all the money to stop working or have millions of dollars, but the intentionality around where you spend. And for lots of people that grew up very frugal, just learning to spend is hard. Like for me, it's like, even though I have enough money to spend money on certain things, I'm still spending an hour trying to save $30 on a flight. Like, so learning that it's a slow process, but that book was very helpful and that conversation. So that's one of my 5.
I love that. No, that's well said too. I agree. You don't necessarily have to be a multimillionaire to take advantage of the messaging there. And I think it fits perfectly the definition you shared about a hack, which is like basically a big mindset shift, right? So looking at it financially, I had a powerful experience with that book as well. And I feel like for travelers listening, not that we need permission to spend money on travel, but it will definitely give you the mindset and encouragement to go and do so and maybe feel less guilty about it.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So the next one. This sounds so coy as a phrase, like always negotiate, but I want to explain it because I don't mean always negotiate, at the grocery store, hey, can I get these eggs for 10% off? That's not what I'm talking about. But I think there are a lot of things in life that we forget are negotiations. And I have so many examples of what that could mean. And in those places, starting to actually learn to do this is so valuable. I have a woman, I'm pulling up this email because she was like, I really need to share this because I listened to your episode about negotiating and I've gotten all this training done. And finally I went and negotiated with my boss. And I over the last 4 years, I've managed to get, a raise all 4 of the last 4 years. But not only that, I was able to get a colleague of mine who has the same certification. They also got raises as well. And it's just one of those things where oftentimes companies aren't always looking out for you and it's kind of on you to look out for yourself. And just asking the question, hey, what would it take for me to get an increase in my salary this year? Or, can I have this increase? Sometimes it just happens. And in her circumstance, every year she asked these questions and, she said they weren't huge raises, but it was like 3, 5, and 3%. And when you compound those over 4 years, that's a really big impact, especially over the last 4 years. And so that's one. And she just didn't know it was something she could do and finally did it. And so that was one. On the travel front, I talked to an Airbnb host who told me that a good majority, maybe not majority, but a very reasonable number of the bookings are negotiated. And I was like, what? Like, I remember when I first heard this, I didn't believe it. And I just kept asking for more. And he's like, yeah, all the time. People are like, hey, I want these 4 nights. It's this price. Can you do lower? And I was like, it didn't even cross my mind that was a thing you could negotiate. And we were about to go on this trip to Paris. And I emailed the host and I was like, hey, we really like your place. And what we did was we kind of had a price range in mind. And then I found a place that was like 20% outside of the price range and said, hey, we're looking at all these places. They're all in this price range. Your place is much nicer, which is probably why it's priced 20% more. But we can't afford it. Like, if you could do this price that these other people that are kind of similar, like your place is a little nicer. I didn't use all the words, but I basically was like, there's a bunch of places that are similar. If you could match this price, we'd love to book with you. And I found a place where the nights we wanted perfectly fit with their other reservations, right? It was like, so someone else could come and book 3 nights with them, and then they'd have a 1 stranded night. So I knew it was really appealing to them to be able to fill every night 100% without having 1 night stays. They were like, sure. And I was like, God, I should have gone lower. That was one. If you don't live in the US, this is probably not a thing. And if you do, it's a big thing. But I did this episode with a guy named Marshall Allen about fighting back on healthcare bills. And like in the US, medical care is super expensive and the system's crazy. And for all the non-US people listening, you probably already know how crazy it is, but even if you haven't experienced it. But you can negotiate most medical things. You can negotiate the cost of medical care. You can negotiate, how things get categorized. You can negotiate with your insurance company. And, I think in his example, and he has this book, I think it's called Never Pay the First Bill. Like he's had people that have cut medical bills in half just by following like 4 or 5 steps of negotiating. And you can go in and say, hey, is there a cash price? And so many medical facilities in the US will be like, oh, you're paying cash? We'll give you 40% off. I went to my dentist and I was like, hey, if I don't have dental insurance, is there a better deal? And he's like, oh yeah, we have this plan. And the plan they have is actually better than the dental insurance plan. I didn't even have to negotiate. They just had a thing. And so I think on one hand, negotiating can unlock a ton. On the other hand, being the person that is always negotiating it might not make you feel good. And so one of my mentors, a guy named Andy Ratcliffe, who's a really successful entrepreneur and venture capitalist, he shared in, I think the first episode I did with him really early on, his negotiation strategy. And I've adopted it and I use it all the time. And all he does is he would say it as, I just put the gun in the other person's hand and I let them fire. And that's probably a bit of an extreme example, especially for
it's a
for
very
the
American
crowd.
example, Chris.
Yeah, it's a very American example. But the idea being, I'm constantly saying, hey, you know what? Whatever you think is fair is effectively another way to say it. So I'm like, hey, someone says, hey, what price do you want? You know what? Like, we're both trying to get a good deal. Why don't you just pick whatever you think is fair? And I find that 90% of the time, that other person picks something that is actually fair and isn't trying to take advantage of me, and they feel good about it. And then 10% of the time, someone really wants to take advantage of you, and you just, you accept it, move on, and try not to work with that person. So if you go to your boss and you say, hey, I've worked really hard, I think that I probably deserve 10 or 20% or whatever it is, but I'm going to let you decide what you think is fair. Sometimes you can get a lot farther than having to go back and forth, and it especially works well with friends. If you're like, hey, my friend wants to borrow my car for a week. Don't play the game of, well, Turo charges this and that. Just say, hey, there's some cost to this because it's going to be wear and tear. Whatever you think's fair, that's fine. And it's just such an easy way to negotiate that results in really great outcomes and feels good and isn't, maybe it's kind of like the Satisficer version of a negotiation, but it's been super effective for me.
Yeah, nice. I love that. You reminded me when you were telling the story about the dental program that one time, this happened in Colorado, I was in the chair at the dentist office, literally like mouth open, like, drool coming out of the side of the corner of my mouth. And they were telling me I had like 2 cavities to fill. And I was like, well, how much does it cost? I negotiated in the dental chair, and he's like, oh, well, I forget what he said. It was like $200 or whatever. I was like, well, that's quite expensive. Like, if I can come back and do it, or like, I'd rather get it done right now though. Can you do 2 for, 200 or whatever?
Yeah, I'm already in the chair.
And he said, well, yeah, I'm here. Like, let's do it. Like, can we, come down on price? And he did. It's just so funny because it was a strange moment because I had never imagined negotiating in that circumstance. But then in the moment, I was just like, well, what do you have to lose?
No. Yeah. I do it on live chat. You're buying something from some retailer online. I'll be like, hey, live chat. I see the little icon in the bottom right. I'm like, hey, I'm about to check out. It's pretty expensive. Not sure if it makes sense. Any deals you have right now? And I've gotten everything from like, great, refresh your cart. I just took 30% off. And I'm like, well, that's really cool that you could even do that. To here's a promo code. And one time someone was like, I've got nothing, but if you go search the internet, we have a really great referral program where you're going to get a deal if you use someone's referral. So I'd encourage you to go search around for one.
Yeah,
and sometimes people
they
say
just
no,
tip you off.
but you could just ask.
Yeah, you can always ask at hotels too. Of course, at the front desk. I always used to ask in kind of like a cheeky way, I guess you would call it. I'd be like, hey, like, I see you typing in the computer there. Do you have any like super secret discounts going on in there, that you can find? Or you guys have something going on back there, And 9 times out of 10, they would hook it up. And so, yeah.
This doesn't fit into one of the 5, but one of my favorite things is if you book a hotel and you book it directly with the hotel, just email them in advance and be like, hey, we're coming. We're staying at your hotel. We're really excited. If you're celebrating anything, let them know. And follow up like 2-3 days before check-in and say, hey, we're still planning on coming. Really excited. the treatment you get for kind of like opening the door for that hotel to win your business and like build your loyalty is so incredible at what happens. And I've got hundreds of emails of everything from nothing to free upgrades to embroidered pillows with your initials on them to champagne to like, decorating the room with balloons for a kid's birthday and all kinds of stuff. And again, it's like, you're not asking them to do something and getting upset if they're not. You're kind of like, hey, you're giving them an opportunity to showcase their hospitality. And more often than not, hotels will take you up on that if you book directly with them. If you go book with like TripAdvisor, Travelocity, Expedia, and then you do that, I would say it's going to be more like one out of 10. But I would say more often than not, especially at a hotel that, has a kitchen to be able to send up an amenity of food or champagne, has, upgraded rooms that they could move you into or better views. If you're staying at like a hostel, emailing them is probably not going to get you much. But in many scenarios, I think it's super, super valuable.
Nice. Okay. We're on to the final.
I know, the final one. And then I got like a little 10-second bonus. So the final one came from an episode I did recently with a guy named Kai, who's made an entire business out of finding deals and like turning them into income. And it was the craziest thing that's maybe similar-ish to the Die With Zero moment, where all of a sudden I'm just like, every time I see something, I'm like, is this an opportunity to make money? And they're hiding all over the place in plain sight. And so one great example was, gift cards. If you see gift cards on sale, I was like, oh, gift cards are on sale. You could just resell them. There are a lot of people online who just buy gift cards. And there's a whole massive $1 million plus business of reselling gift cards. And that was one of the interesting ones. But as a good example of this, Amex cards and most credit cards in the US at least, they'll have all these offers where it's like, oh, if you go spend $200 at Lowe's home improvement store, we'll give you a $50 credit. And so I was thinking about this the other week and I was like, okay, well, Lowe's has that gift card aisle. So I went to my daughters and I was like, hey, do you guys want to make some money today? Like we can go learn what it's like to make money. And they're like, how are we going to do it? And how much? And normally I would take kids to like the recycling center and we'll drop off cans and we'll make like $3, right? But today I was like, I got all these offers and I had them on like 7 different credit cards. I was like, we're going to go to Lowe's and we're going to buy gift cards and we're going to sell those gift cards. So we bought, I think I had, let's call it 6 because the math's easier. I bought $1,200 of gift cards and sold them at 10% off. So I lost money on the gift cards, but the Amex offer was 25% back on the each $200 purchase. So it was 50 off 200. So we lost 10% and made 25%, spending $1,200. The kids made like $150. Like 2 toddlers made $150. Like afterwards, they were like, "What can we buy with this?" They were like, "Could we buy an ice cream?" I was like, "We could buy ice cream all week."
You're like, "Yeah, go ahead. I'll keep the change."
And it was really funny. They were like, "Really?" And they were like, "Could we buy you and mom ice cream?" And I was like, "Go for it."
Yeah.
And so I'm looking all the time at, oh, this thing is on sale. Maybe I don't need it. Let's not buy it if I don't need it, but is there a way to turn that deal into something else? And sometimes that's saving you money. I know people that switch their cell phone carrier every month for some lucrative promotion to get the new iPhone. And like, yeah, it's a little bit of time, but if you're going to buy an iPhone every year and this will let you save $1,000, and then they're like, well, what if I don't need an iPhone every year? What if I switch carriers for my whole family? We get 4 iPhones and then we just sell them. Now all of a sudden I made $4,000 selling iPhones. And so Kai, who I interviewed, just has this kind of mental model of always looking for these deals. There are all these meal kits in the US that will send you like ingredients to make dinners for the week. And I'm sure this exists around the world. So he would go and order a meal kit, get the free one. And he was like, gosh, but there's like 30 companies offering this service. So for 30 weeks, he just tried all 30 of them, got his free meal kit, made dinner with it. And in some of them, he noticed that it didn't matter how many people you were. You always got your first week free. So he would order a meal kit and he would order it for like 10 people in his house. And he'd have all this chicken in the freezer and, all this stuff. And then he would just go through all 30. And the irony was, after he didn't renew for the second week, he was like about 10 to 20 weeks later, they'd send me an email and be like, hey, do you want to try it again and get another free week? And so he was on this cycle of like, he went through all of them. And by the time he got through all of them, the first one he had done was like, do you want to do it again?
Right.
And he could just kind of repeat it. And it ended up being like probably, I want to say like 6-figure income a year between cost savings and income generating things. And in this episode with him, we just ran through all of them in every category. And I can't remember the exact number of dollars that I think he makes working like 20 hours a week. I think the episode we did was how to make $3,000 a month, like an easy $3,000 a month, spending a couple hours on all these kind of repeatable deal things. So that just like opened my eyes to all of these cases where, and then the next week I was like, oh, wow. Amex has some offers for $50 off $250 at Tory Burch, which is like a high-end designer. I don't need anything from Tory Burch, except they sell gift cards. So my daughter, and I had to put my kids to work because it was all online. So I made my daughter type in the credit card numbers. Like that was her contribution. I was like, you have to type in each of these 10 credit card numbers. And then they made like $200. I was like, man, if I can make my kids $100-$200 a week doing these deals and we put into their, and they save at least half of it. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're not going to be dying with zero.
That's the perfect example of what I would think of when I think of a hack,
Yeah. Well, I had to at least include one in that bucket.
That's awesome.
And I'd say I'm going to bundle this bonus one into that one. And I don't know if this will work anywhere but the US. But every state in the US has a place where when companies owe you money and they can't find you, they just send it to the state to manage it. And there's these unclaimed money databases. And so you go in and you say, oh, I live in Colorado. Let's go to Colorado unclaimed money. Let's put in my name and see what's there. And I would say I ran the numbers on this by polling my audience. Like 50% of people found money, if not more. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a large percentage of people found money that they were owed. A meaningful percentage of people found over $100, and something like 5% of people found over $1,000. Sometimes it's I canceled my phone bill or my phone or cable when I moved, and they never refunded me, or they mailed the check to the house that I no longer live in. Sometimes it's I paid for a medical thing and then my insurance company later covered it, and so the medical company needs to refund me and they never did. It used to be that flight credits didn't always expire, so I had like $100 from Delta that they tried to get. It was like a gift card that after 5 years I never used, and they said it never expired, but they didn't want to carry it on their books, so they sent it to the state. So there's all these little things. You might only find 20 cents, and it might not be worth your time. But if you live in the States, go search your unclaimed money database, and I would say send Jason an email, or send me an email, or send us both an email if you find anything meaningful. And it would blow my mind if at least one or two people didn't say, wow, I found $500, $1,000 or more.
Nice. Found money. Nobody hates found money. Before I let you go, great list, by the way. Thank you. Of course. Yeah. Well, let people know what you want them to do. Just check out the pod, or give them the 101.
Yeah. I mean, if you're listening to a podcast now and this episode's wrapping up and you want something else, go to search all the hacks and you'll find my show. Each episode's kind of a deep dive into something. And that something could be, a portfolio of credit cards. It could be oral health. We were talking about the dentist. I'm doing a whole episode on oral hygiene. But it also could be on a country. It could be on learning to write. It could be on credit scores. It could be on insurance. And so scroll through, find something you're looking to optimize in your life and have a listen and hopefully enjoy. And if you want, an update every week on kind of the best deals, like I mentioned, when miles and points are on sale, you can go to allthehacks.com/email, and we do a weekly newsletter every Saturday morning.
Cool. How are you using AI?
I mean, I probably use a AI tool multiple times a day, every day, but not in any extreme crazy way. But it's just become my research. Like every arm of research, it's just insane how knowledgeable it is. So I was trying to figure out a way to get Japan Airlines status the other day, right? Because there's a way to get it and you get it for life. And if you hold it,
Okay.
Yeah, if you get
wow.
Japan Airlines 1,500 Japan Air life points, you get status for life. They'll send you a card. That card will let you into any One World lounge when you're traveling. So you can go to all the American lounges, anything for your life. And one way to get it is to get the US Japan Airlines card and spend $450,000 on it. And it is not a lucratively earning card. So that wasn't great. And then one of them was that you could buy, and this is designed for Japanese residents, but it said, if you hold Japan Airlines stock on, I think it was March 31st, and then you vote in the annual shareholders vote, and you still hold the stock on September 30th, you will get a life status point for every share you hold. And I was like, okay, how do I buy a Japan stock? Can I even vote for this stock if I don't live in Japan? And how does this work? And I literally went to ChatGPT. I was like, how could I buy Japan Airlines stock as a US citizen and vote in the shareholder meeting? And it's literally like, use one of these brokerage firms that lets you buy it internationally. They'll send you this letter. Here's the website where you register to vote on this. Like something that would have been much, much harder for me to look at. That's one. I'm literally going through what was that 90s like pet that people had in water that was kind of like a sea creature? And it's like sea monkeys. And I was like, great. Like I could have searched for it, but I just got an answer in a couple seconds. Review a legal doc, search the terms and conditions of something, help me write a title for a podcast episode, answer a question about whether there's any law that prohibits an airline from, stopping you from using the first class bathroom. I'm just looking through the list of random things I looked up. Take this picture of me and my wife and roast us. Which by the way, is a really great one. Like take a picture of you and your partner or yourself and just say, roast us. And it's like, I took a picture of us hiking in Iceland and it's like, these two look like they booked a romantic glacier hike, but dressed like they accidentally wandered out of an REI catalog photo shoot. And then I was like, and it's like, do you want it more savage or more playful? And I'm like, make it more savage. And it's like, these two look like they heard Iceland is trendy and said, cool, let's cosplay as Lost Patagonia mannequins.
That's pretty good, man.
So if someone just needs a fun way to use AI,
yeah,
go take any photo and ask it to roast you. It is
That's
so good.
Funny. That's so funny. I'm going to try that after this.
I'm sure there are more productive ways to use it for business, and I do those things. But sometimes you just need a good laugh.
Yeah, for sure. I asked it to write me a joke for my newsletter that was travel related, and I was writing about digital nomad visas and remote work visas and things like that. And the joke it came up with was something like, why didn't the digital nomad why didn't the digital nomad get a visa to New Zealand? Because they weren't remotely qualified. I asked it to write me a bad dad joke, like that was digital nomad lifestyle themed. Anyway, it was kind of funny, but I was like, not bad. Maybe I could have came up with that, but not bad. Two more before I let you go, if that's okay. I see a slew of recommendations on your website that involve a lot of monthly software subscriptions, which everybody loves. I know everybody loves software subscriptions. Which ones are worth it, man, in your experience?
If you travel a ton, have points and miles, I would say having one subscription to an award search tool. If your use case exceeds what a lot of them have for free is great. Award tool, points, yeah, seats.aero are kind of three of my favorites. For a travel person, I think that's a great one. I would say I should go look at my list of if you go to allthehacks.com/deals, or I can't remember, allthehacks.com/stuff. Stuff is like all the things I use. Deals is all the deals. There's decent overlap on them because the way we work with brands is I just reach out to the companies that I use their products and ask them if they could be sponsors of the podcast instead of just, working with anyone. I think when I think about subscriptions, on one hand, I really hate them. And then on the other hand, if they're solving a problem in my life, like I'd rather pay for the good solution than use the crappy solution. So like Mint was a budgeting app and I use Copilot. And if you don't have an iPhone, maybe check out Monarch Money. But Copilot's my preferred. Like, I'd rather pay for a really good one than use, a mediocre one or one that's constantly sending my ads or selling my data or that kind of stuff. And if your data is getting sold, you'll probably find that if you, I don't know how much this exists overseas, but in the US, if you just search your like name and your street address, you'll be like, wow, my information's all over the internet. So I have a subscription to Delete Me for everyone in my family, like even parents. And they just constantly go and remove your data from all the data brokers. You can do it yourself. Every one of those data brokers has an opt-out policy. And it takes hours and hours and hours because there's hundreds and hundreds of them. They were one of my earlier partners because I used the product. I was like, this is amazing. They'd never worked with podcasts. And they were like, yeah, we'll love to sponsor the podcast. And we've been doing it for 2 years. So there is a deal, allthehacks.com/delete-me or /deals. Let's see what else. If you like those like Amex offer, card linked offers, Card Pointers is a cool browser extension and app that just auto adds them. So like instead of you having to log in and find them, it'll auto add them. And the way most of them work is if you add them to one card, you can't add them to another, but they'll add them to all the cards in the same second. So like if you hit the Amex API at the same second for all your cards, you can end up getting the deal like 10 times. So that go to Lowe's 7 times deal wouldn't have been possible without a subscription software. I use Superhuman for email. I think if you're someone who does a lot of email, find the tool that makes you more efficient. I always think like, gosh, do I want to pay $30 a month for email when Gmail is free? And I'm like, well, if it's going to save me 5 hours a week times 52 weeks a year, do I want to pay $30 a month for that amount of time? Absolutely. I don't know. Did other ones stand out that you're like, is this one worth it?
No. I was just curious what your gut reaction was on that, because it is a tough call at some point, because you can look at all these things and you can see how they can help you, but you feel like you got to draw the line somewhere. You know what I mean? Any other books you want to recommend? And you mentioned a few through the episode, but is there one or two books that you've read that have really made an impact on you?
A friend of mine, this guy, Sahil Bloom, I've had him on the pod 3 or 4 times. He just wrote this book called The 5 Types of Wealth. And I would say, had I not known him and talked to him about the book as he was writing it, it might have been a Bill Perkins Die with Zero-esque moment when I read it. But it was such a slow burn because I've gotten to know him. I've subscribed to him for a while. But the premise of the book is very simple. There is more than financial wealth. There's social, time, physical, mental. Maybe those are the 4 other ones. And it's the books, I could see it, but it's not close enough that I can read the text. The idea that you don't just need money to be happy. It's a similar concept to Die with Zero, but presented very differently with a lot of great kind of illustrations and stuff. I had him on the pod. We talked about it. You can go listen to that. If you want to go deeper, you could buy the book, Sahil Bloom's 5 Types of Wealth. It recently came out, and it is an awesome book.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Before we jam, I thought I would give you the opportunity to either share a quote or a motto or anything you want to leave people with. Any last bit of words of wisdom? Go for it.
It's funny, the one thing, this is actually, I think it's Sahil's rule, which I've adopted, that I just wish everyone would adopt. Actually, 2. I got 2. 2 friends of mine have said things that I'm like, I love this. One of them, I sent him a note and I was like, hey, do you want any help doing this? He asked me a question and I answered. I said, do you want some help figuring it out? And he goes, no, I try to always spend 15 minutes answering a question before I ask someone to do it for me. And I was like, if the whole world, like the number of times I've gotten a question that could have been answered by someone doing a quick search online, is so many. And I was like, man, that is one motto and mantra for my life. I am going to spend some amount of time trying to solve a problem before asking someone else to solve it for me.
It's only fair.
That's one. And then the second one is, there are things, like when you think about complaining, there are things you can fix and you can't. If you can fix them, don't complain, just fix them. If you can't fix them, don't complain because you can't fix them. No complaining. Hard to teach that one to a kid, but for adults, I think if you have people that complain a lot, find that post Sahil wrote about why his number 1 rule is don't complain and share it with them and be like, this was so interesting.
I love it, man. So much great stuff in this episode. Thank you so much. I'm glad we finally got to do it. I'm glad we're in touch, and let's have you back again sometimes. You guys take a trip out to Norway. You know,
I would love to.
We got saunas
As a
out
child,
here.
I had four,
we got
four
clothing
au pairs.
optional things out here. It sounds like that's something you guys are in. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I had 4 au pairs from Norway as a kid.
Oh,
And
you
so,
did?
like,
Really? That's crazy.
every book report, every like presentation, every bring an international food to school. It was Norway
Get
for
outta
4
here.
or 5 years straight.
Wow.
And so like it's on the list. We made it to Sweden and Denmark and Iceland. And so like somehow we've skirted around it in every way. So it will happen.
That's crazy. Yeah, such a strong connection too with the au pair
Yeah.
connection. That's awesome.
So it'll happen. I will let you know. I will see you there.
Amazing.
And thanks for having me.
We'll do it in person next time. Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
There you have it. Thanks to Chris Hutchins once again for taking the time to go back and pull out those best hacks of all the hacks. And you can check out his podcast and his website. We'll link up to it in the show notes. I did mention during the intro, life hacking has downsides like anything else. I'll share my overall takeaway at the end. I think this episode was super useful. So this is not a knock on Chris's work or anything in this episode. Of course, I want to do things smart like everybody else. And when you find out some of these quote unquote hacks, then they can really help you out in business, in life, in travel, and certainly have helped me over the years in trying to do things smarter. But when you embrace life hacking as a core philosophy of your life and you're really married to that philosophy, let's say, I think some of the downsides I wanted to point out is, number one, just trying to get caught up in figuring out the right hack, trying to do things perfectly every time. This can lead to inaction or, chasing some kind of version of life where everything's perfect, which of course is not realistic. So we have to be aware of that, not set ourselves up for this idea that we're going to find all the perfect hacks all the time. We're going to optimize everything and everything's going to be perfect all the time. And if things don't work out, then, it completely throws our day off. It completely throws off our morning or our afternoon or whatever. So something to be aware of there. I think also there is this idea of like a false sense of control. Life hacks can sometimes make us feel like we're in control of all these aspects of our life. But actually, we know life is messy. Most things are simply not controllable. And, maybe like a pandemic is an example of that. We all went through that, not to bring that up again. But when something like that happens, we realize how little control we actually have over a lot of things. And, if we get into like this sort of life hacking, optimizing life philosophy, that's cool and that can be super beneficial, but we should also keep that in mind. We can't control a lot of things and things are going to happen. And of course, lastly, we are human. We're not factory robots that need to be optimized at all times for a bigger bottom line or for more productivity. For example, yes, you can hire a cleaner. I have myself to save time, especially during busy parts of life. But I also know there are feelings of, for example, presence and pride in washing dishes and reminders of humbleness and humility when cleaning toilets. You don't get that if you don't do that regularly. You can also hire a cook or go out to eat all the time to be more productive, let's say. But what about the feelings of satisfaction you get when you cook a new recipe to perfection, or you discover a new use for a spice, or you see the smiles on the faces of your family or your friends or the people you're serving as they dig in to something that you made with your own hands? So is slowing down to do the normal daily activities and learning to embrace and find joy in all of that and in everything that comes with that, is that the ultimate, quote, life hack? Maybe just finding peace in the everyday messiness of life and being human is the most important, quote, life upgrade of all. So I just want to leave you with that. And lastly, this quote from Anthony J. D'Angelo, who said, "When solving problems, dig at the roots instead of just hacking at the leaves." One last thing, zerototravel.com/newsletter. If you're coming out of this one, you haven't signed up there, it's free. Join the community over there to get more personal musings like this. helpful travel links, and so on. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.